China is stepping up as a global leader in climate action, boldly announcing its first-ever commitment to reduce emissions, a move that directly challenges the climate skepticism voiced by the United States. But here's where it gets controversial. While China's pledge marks a historic shift, many experts argue it still doesn't go far enough to truly combat the escalating climate crisis. On September 24th, during a climate leaders summit convened by UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres, Chinese President Xi Jinping delivered a live video address from Beijing, outlining China's ambitious new climate goals. For the first time, China, the world's largest greenhouse gas emitter, committed to cutting its emissions by 7 to 10% from their peak levels by 2035. This is a significant departure from previous policies that focused mainly on capping emissions growth rather than reducing them outright. Xi also revealed plans to dramatically expand China's renewable energy capacity, aiming to increase wind and solar power output sixfold compared to 2020 levels within the next decade. This expansion is expected to raise the share of non-fossil fuels in China's energy mix to over 30%, signaling a major shift toward cleaner energy sources. However, despite these strides, the announced emissions reduction target fell short of what Xi's speech also included a pointed, though indirect, criticism of the United States. Without naming the country, he condemned the retreat from climate goals by some countries, clearly referencing the U.S. stance. He emphasized that the global community must remain committed to a green and low-carbon transformation, despite setbacks from certain nations. This rebuke came just a day after U.S. President Donald Trump delivered a controversial speech at the UN General Assembly dismissing climate change as a con job, disparaging scientists, and criticizing other countries, including China and EU members, for their clean energy initiatives. Trump's administration has formally initiated a second withdrawal from the Paris Agreement, a landmark international treaty aimed at limiting global warming to well below 1.5 degrees Celsius. The U.S. remains the largest historical emitter of greenhouse gases and the second largest current emitter after China. Political scientist Ian Bremmer from the Belfer Center highlighted the implications of this U.S. stance, suggesting that Trump's climate denial effectively hands over the global market for clean energy to China. Bremmer warned that while the U.S. clings to fossil fuels, China is positioning itself as the dominant electrostate, a development that contradicts the goal of making America great again, especially if one cares about the planet's future. Despite the spotlight on China's new targets, the global response to recent climate pledges has been mixed and, in many cases, underwhelming. Ahead of the upcoming COP30 summit in Brazil, environmentalists and analysts have expressed concern that the commitments from major economies still fall short of what's necessary to address the rapidly worsening climate emergency. Brazilian President Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva underscored the urgency, warning that the world's faith in leadership hinges on the seriousness of these climate promises. Brazil itself has pledged to reduce emissions by 59% to 67% by 2035 and to intensify efforts against deforestation. Lula cautioned that continued denialism could erode public trust and ultimately harm everyone. UN Secretary-General Antonio Guterres acknowledged progress made under the Paris Agreement, noting that it has helped reduce the projected global temperature rise from 4 degrees Celsius to about 2.6 degrees. Yet, he stressed that this is still far from the critical 1.5-degree target, especially as the planet has already warmed by more than 1.2 degrees since pre-industrial times. Guterres called for more ambitious and faster climate plans for 2035. Meanwhile, the European Union has yet to finalize its new climate target, with plans to submit a provisional goal that could be revised later. EU President Ursula von der Leyen assured the summit that the bloc is on track to cut emissions by 55% by 2030, with a 2035 reduction target estimated between 66% and 72%. Australia, preparing to host the 2026 UN Climate Summit, announced its own commitment to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 62% to 70% below 2005 levels by 2035. Australian Prime Minister Anthony Albanese emphasized the importance of global cooperation on climate change, highlighting the need to balance environmental goals with economic security and job creation. Small island nations, often the most vulnerable to climate impacts, also made their voices heard. Palau, representing the Alliance of Small Island States, pledged to cut emissions to 44% of 2015 levels by 2035. Palau's President Serangil Wips reminded world leaders of a recent International Court of Justice advisory opinion that underscores a legal obligation for countries to take stronger climate action, especially those with the greatest responsibility and capacity. This complex mix of commitments and criticisms paints a vivid picture of the current global climate landscape, one marked by leadership shifts, political tensions, and urgent calls for more decisive action. The question remains, will these pledges be enough to steer the world toward a sustainable future? Or are we witnessing a dangerous stalemate that could jeopardize the planet's health? What do you think? Is China's new climate plan a genuine breakthrough or just cautious posturing? And how should the international community respond to the U.S. retreat from climate leadership? Share your thoughts and join the conversation below.